Okay. Looks like he's giving you a little click like, huh? Well, let's see if you click like during this video. All you gotta do is go down and click like on it and it'll be okay. I made a joke before about this guy going, I'm okay, but right here on him is a stab wound. And that punctured through his ribs right there and punctured his lung. And they figured that's pretty much what took him out. And he had a couple of marks on him also. And this is the pre-dynastic Gebelien mummy that's known as Ginger that you can find in the British Museum. It's got its own solo exhibit. It's kind of neat because it shows you a time before they had really pulled together the thing that we know of as the Egyptian mummification and all of that stuff. In fact, they believe that this led into the idea of mummification, i.e., what this is natural sand desiccation, to where someone gets put out there and they basically turn into a piece of beef jerky and get dehydrated rapidly. And because they're trapped in sand and stuff, flies and things don't get to them to start causing maggots or anything weird like that, and bacteria doesn't get to them. It perhaps keeps it to a cooked state to the point it just turns into beef jerky naturally. And and beef jerky turns all red and brown whenever it does. You take a nice pink piece of meat and then make beef jerky out of it, and then you know how dark beef jerky is. People have had beef jerky, right? Well, jerky is from around way before recorded time too, by the way. I may make a video about thoughts on beef jerky, but right now we're going to discuss this guy, and new research rewrites history of tattooing. I did a vid on this about 2 years ago, right when it came out, from another source, and it had less pictures, if you will, on it. And what was neat about it is they had done it with infrared, and there was just a couple of pictures on them and stuff, right? And so this is a Gebelien area up in Egypt. It's not way down at the delta, and this is perhaps what they believe may have died in the process of the fights back and forth that ended up being what we know of as the Narmer Menez time, when they all unified. And so that goes along with the Nakata people that we look at, and the Bedarians, and what we believe is the Natufians that came there. Genetics is showing that that's a running up of there. I've got a video of recent did, and I don't know which one's coming first, but of these circles that are much south of the Nile and the Great Lakes area, and out into there you pitch out into towards the Cape in southern Sahara, sub-Saharan area down near the Cape, and there's all these rings around in the ground. And I did a video about it, I don't know, 2 years ago, but there's been found a bunch of them that are around in Jordan that match it perfectly and stuff, and that they're saying that that goes with the Natufians too, and that makes somewhat sense. You can see his blonde and curly hair, so they've named him Ginger. And he doesn't have blonde hair like, oh man, I don't know who to describe. He doesn't have blonde hair like Ginger uh, of Gilligan's Island, because that's a redhead. And they named him a redhead because looking at his hair under a microscope, he has some red tinges into it. And I've got a recent video where I show me where I'm going up to the end of high school, and whenever you do, you can see my hair starting to turn this color. And whenever it's long, of course, it gets dark looking on the inside of it, but it wasn't much. Staying out in the sun, and that picture that I got there is just coming out of winter or whatever, but so I haven't gotten much tan yet, but starting to, because we're running around with just shorts on and stuff. and I just got my new car and everything. It was a funny thing that I did for reveals. I see all these reveals people do for 5,000 reveals and everything, and because I show myself shirtless, I'm like, nipple reveal. Let's see if I get any takes on that. Anyhow, that was when I was 16. I was about, oh, I don't know, 155, 160 pounds and stuff, and starting to work out some with my brother. He was starting to be a bodybuilder and everything, and I would spot him and work out with him occasionally and stuff. But then I got into the workout programs at school and stuff and bulked up and got close to 200 pounds before I got out. And yeah, I don't know, I got about an inch and a half more height on there. Ended up being about 5'10" and 3/4 without shoes on. 5'11", right at 6 foot, depending on what kind of footwear I had on. But anyhow, so I thought that'd be kind of funny to put out for y'all. But anyhow, what's neat about this is they found that over here on his shoulder, this smudge that you would think nothing of, not the stab wound. And amazingly, they investigated this stab wound over 100 years ago. They'll talk about it here in a second. And many times, and never knew this existed, and somebody used infrared on it. And I was going to talk about the hair and stuff too. So when I was a kid, I had we got a microscope, and it came with a bunch of slides. It had like 60 slides in it. I used all kinds of things, butterfly wings and so on. And I remember one of the coolest things was some kind of pollen from special mulberry tree, and it looked like little fireworks going off, or it looked like little coronaviruses, the way they got that shit colored up and stuff. It looked like little that, but they were different colored, and they had been dyed. And they had other slides that had not been dyed, and butterfly wing pieces and stuff, and you could look really close at it and stuff. And we had ×2 and ×10. You spin it around ×10 and ×2 and get right in on it and all that stuff. And so looking at my hair and stuff too, and after reading the thing about it, I had the golden, not blonde hair like, oh, I don't know, the golfer, the shark, Norman. He has real blonde hair and still has real blonde hair. You look at Trump, and Trump has this ginger blonde hair. This man doesn't have that. He has the next step down that's really just more of a goldenish, and you'd say that it'd probably even get a little darker, but it'd never become chestnut necessarily whenever he got old. And they have taken his hair and looked at it under a microscope and everything, but he had that more goldenish type hair, and then they named him Ginger. Used to be on the exhibit, they had a picture of a Greek god, like Apollo, that was there in an effigy with his curly hair, and they said that his curly hair is like the Greek gods show on their curly hair and stuff like that. They took that down whenever they moved it over, and they put him in this square exhibit that I showed in a video, and I tried to get 15 seconds of it in video, and it flagged, so I cut it in 2 pieces and cut a little chunk out of it of about 2 seconds, and it didn't flag anymore. They were like, oh, I'll let it go, right? Well, a year and a half later, this is one of my videos that y'all have all seen if you've been watching my vids. It's all gone now. The one that had the girl with the Fletcher with the bright red hair that was talking about Egypt and everything, that I had to hack all up in the first place and then re-put it back out, and everybody was like, didn't you do this before? And I was like, yeah, but it's been hacked up now. And then I hacked it up again, and then they still flagged it now, and they flagged it for like 4 seconds worth of video. So someone is just up the butt about anything. It's like I can do still pictures and little bitty clippets and stuff, but certain people. Anyhow, guys, just thought I'd get that off my chest. So he's missing the scalp right here, and there was a sensation that a long time ago or some time ago that they had bumped and rubbed that off, and then some of the pieces they had found there, and they were going to stick it back on. They decided never to do it. But let's look through these pictures real quick. And so here he is giving the old thumbs up, click like. But this was done through the exhibit with an infrared camera. And someone that had one of these things, portable, cool new infrared camera, decided to go around and take pictures of it and stuff, and it looks totally different. And right there on his shoulder, you can see that tattoo. Here's the mark that's on it, or is that the mark that's there? So there's a tattoo there. And he goes, "Ah, you found the secret. Ta-da!" So there's a close-up of it because he got to go into the exhibit apparently and start taking some pictures and everything of it, and researchers got onto it and they've realized what these look like. And that's a ram, and that's what's used in the art, and like the palettes that they find around there, like the Narmer palette and the Warrior palette and stuff like that they've got. And there's also the other mummy that's his companion, female, but they don't say that they had to have been attached. They're in separate their burials and so on like that. Curled up again, hands around the face, body to the left, facing to the east, and she's got this auburnish type hair, but they didn't try to name her Ginger or anything. But and much worse of a body, so they don't put that one on exhibit. Wish they kind of would, but on her they found a series of S's, and that looks like a lot like what's on pottery that everybody calls Z's. And like, you know, look, it's like on the pottery they had ancient cartoons and stuff, and somebody's catching their Z's, and it's like, no, it meant more than that. But like this, you can see this Z's that's on here, but then there's 4 of them, and there's 4 on her. And if you look at it, it's attached to this, and this is a woman effigy right here. And man, if I could get that to go up just a little taller, do it for me. Ta-da! You can see she's got their arms above her head in that ballerina pose. Now, I've made a few videos that contain this in there, but you can see this ballerina pose going all the way up into ancient Europe and stuff, into the very earliest of it, and along with a boat effigies and things like that, which is kind of odd, and it led a whole lot of people to say, well, this looks like proto-Nordic type people were coming back and forth here, and you know, they had contact, and they said no. And then they found that in Denmark they've got the beads that are amber. There's a bunch of amber beads, and then mixed in with them are Egyptian faience beads found from exactly the time of King Tut. But then they found other ones, but they don't want to put out this stuff and everything. And you can see a male that's here, and they said, well, this is a boomerang, or this is this, or what. But he literally looks like a gunslinger. He got his gun on his head. Wah, wah, wah. Look, I killed a snake. And she's like, oh boy, look at my dance. And so, but this Venus type symbology in this woman, ballerina of rebirth, if you will, are seen in those effigies that I've seen shown in Latin pottery. I should go right now into it, but man, I'm going to make this video long if I do. So anyhow, here he is, and they say new research rewrites the history of tattooing. Researchers found a tattoo on the upper arm of this Egyptian mummy. He is thought to have lived around 5,000 years ago. It's like 3100 BC to 3200 BC. I don't think they've changed that. We'll see. And was between 18 and 21 years old, when he died from a stab wound in the back. And the oldest figurative tattogos, you can see this is from CNN. And so they really do check their stuff, and I don't know what a tattogos is, but they have them. The world's oldest figurative tattoos have been discovered on 2 5,000-year-old mummies from Egypt. Tattoos depicting a wild bull and a Barbary sheep were found on the upper arm of a male mummy, while the shoulder and upper arm of a female mummy bore S symbol motifs. The find of which are published in the Journal of Archaeological Science pushes back evidence for the tattooing in Africa by 1,000 years, and it overturns the belief that only women were tattooed in pre-dynastic Egypt, the era before the country's unification by the first pharaoh around 3100 BC. And because they had found women there that had a few tattoos on them, and I show one of those in my older video, but they also show Scythians and all these people that are tattooed up there, and the amount that they are in this, Ice Princess, and all these other people that are tattooed up through there. But then also another person that's famous is Otsi, the Iceman, was tattooed in this same manner. And so I could go into about D&D and how we used to talk about people that had tattoos on them and what it meant and when they were connections and symbology. And you'd have a tattoo on you that was of a tribe, but you'd have a tattoo on you that was your symbology. One was on this shoulder or chest, and one was on this shoulder or chest. And so you would have an overall tribe and everything, and then you would have beliefs and things that you had gone through that would get tattooed on your body. And we had a series of people called thrall warriors that you could basically read that and tell all about them if you knew what it was. If you didn't, you'd be like, what are all these fucking tattoos? So and we had a thing that I went through where people went back in time because they went back to where they were pretty much like knights versus primitives. And but they weren't so primitive, and it's kind of what I show in my stuff. I mean, you think Ugg, but nobody was Ugg back then and stuff. And they were already making tattoos and how they made their tattoos, and they had this ceremony and stuff that went with it. I don't want to go into it. I'm just going to blow a bunch of time. Anyhow, the symbols being tattooed are quite extraordinary. Daniel Antwine, one of the lead researchers in the project and British Museum curator of physiological anthropological studies, tells CNN a sign of status, magical power, or just art. And I have my opinion on that. Just a moment and I'll say it. Antoine says that the animals on the man, especially the bull, are likely to be associated with the status, power, and virility. Yes, both horned animals are frequently depicted in pre-dynastic Egyptian art. Similarly, the S motifs that run vertically over the woman's right shoulder were also used in pottery decoration of the time. Yes, but for a reason. Antoine points out that the mummies, who according to radiocarbon dating live between the 3151 BC and 3017 BC. Okay, so this is more perfected carbon dating and everything. So up to 3300, but down, and actually he could have been somebody that was in the battle that they think that was around 3100 BC because he fits that time. And they've tried to fence it off of that before, but it runs over that time. But now I guess you'd say, just by looking at it, that you would say, but it predates that. And I've always said that this is probably a battle or two that's leading up into it, like for 150 years, over 150 years, they had 5 or 6 battles with these people, and the 5th or 6th one became this culmination. People said, well, we're going to quit doing this one little city and a group of people. We're going to get everybody together, come down and whoop your ass. And that's when the Narmer Palette came in, and it turned into a unification situation. I always made up this thing in my mind that the other half were thinking the same thing, or perhaps they had posed it to each other and objected it in the past, and then were ready to do it at the same time. But it never went off smoothly, as you see on the depictions on the Narmer Palette. So they were before the period before Egyptian hieroglyphics came into use, so there was only just symbology. This makes it harder to determine the meanings behind the symbols, as all of it has to go on parallels and imagery found elsewhere. You see the ram, and it goes with Aries, and then you have the bull, and it's the time of Taurus. And you have these people that are worshiping this and going through it, and it has to do with their physiology and everything. So it's also a time where you're going from Taurus into Aries. Like there's a time whenever you go into Aries and into Pisces. There's Leo. Okay, never mind. The male mummy's sheep tattoo resembles that found in pre-dynastic carvings, they mentioned. He speculates that the tattoos probably symbolize a combination of things. The reference status may be bravery in the case of the animals, but it also may be something more complex like cult or magical knowledge or protection. And yes, it's this whole idea that people would get these tattoos on them and it means something. If there's somebody watching this video and they have tattoos on them, and they're really some kind of biker person and stuff, and I'm especially talking to perhaps more of an elder crowd, and I don't want to offend any young people that are getting tattoos, but there would be a reason that you got that tattoo. I got a little tattoo here on my forearm. It's just a little cross thing that we got to be part of a group that we, da da da. And a lot of those guys got tattooed up like crazy. But it was one symbol, and all of their tattoos, they left that open always and stuff and everything. I never got anything. I remember going to a place and whether we were going to get one, and the guy said, "You're not going to get one, are you?" And I go, "Man, I don't know what." And he goes, "Well, you got to get something that's about you, that's for you." And I was looking around on the walls, and I go, "Man, it ain't about me." And these tattoos wouldn't be about me. It'd be something that maybe I stood for. So you see people in the military that get these militaristic tattoos, and it shows you that they are about it. And so that's about them, but it's what they stand for, and it's something else. But I'd get a clownfish and an anemone with a lionfish behind it or something for maybe, and that would have to take up half my back or some crap, and that'd look cool. Yeah, and if they could do it right in the 3D thing with some corals around it and stuff. And I've really thought about doing that, but no, just no. But something that meant something, like really what these symbolized things mean. And people got Celtic tattoos, and there was a period of 10, 15, 20 years people got this stuff, and it went to barbed wire stuff and all kinds of weird stuff. But those meant something. And so tattoos generally symbolize things and certain ages, but also symbolizing perhaps they were the master of beast, and these were already cattle farmer stuff. They had it going on with them, and they're doing goats and this, that, and the other. Or was there goat tribe people, and there was the other tribe people, and they had already getting together, and so this guy here already had tattoos referencing the facts that they were come together, and it comes from just after the fact, and it's everybody's getting tattoos of both of them. Or what is this symbology, right? Well, a lot of people can put things, like I even try to, and say, well, it's the age of Taurus, and it's the age of this, and it's the age of that, and here comes the Aryans with the Aries and everything, and you can't really connect it all to it. Those are Aryan people. The Nile is from Nilus, and it's a river god of the Greeks. The Nile was never called Nile. It was called the river Ar, A-U-R, or A-R. And they say that got passed down enough to where aura, as the shining of things, as the sun shining off of the Nile, is where aura comes from. I would say that linguistics say that it comes from 3 or 4 different ways, and a lot of times they discount things that linguistically come from 3 or 4 different ways. But whenever you find out that's all different forms of Proto Indo European language that branched out as to be different, but eventually there is some convergence going on, and so similarities form about. All there are drastic differences between something like French and English that I'm speaking right now. You wouldn't believe how close they are. And how something like French or ancient Irish is real close to Sanskrit. And I've shown this in a few videos and everything, but let's get back onto this tattoo subject here as I deviate from. But they had magical protections. I don't want to get into it. Okay. There's a third phase of that too. They were very sophisticated people 5,000 years ago. He says there's no reason why their reasoning for having a tattoo on their body wouldn't be as multifaceted as it is today. Okay, there. Maybe I shouldn't have said all that other crap. Ancient tattoos artists. The research suggests the tattooing process could have been similar to that today, using a needle to insert a carbon-based element, probably soot, under the skin. They were very fine craftsmen, so I'm sure that they would have been very good at tattooing, says Antoine. Back when we played D&D, I had found this thing that said what they had made it out of, and apparently it had uric acid, and they didn't realize if it was human urine or for some special animal and stuff. But they had these other things that looked like either it was the way that you would make a sacred war paint or a sacred dye, or you would, and people that were looking at this was like, okay, this must be tattooing ink, because there's not much of it. It's in this little dish type thing, and so you're not trying to dye a bunch of clothes. Now you could take and run string through that and put darker fabrics into there, but this is a way to make black, but it's also this real dark organic green that's in it and everything. And what does it have to do with everything? Well, it looked like that was what it was. And so we made up this idea with this thing that you have to do certain things, and take your own earwax and make this candle out of it and make this soot and do this bullshit and put it all together. And you have to go and find a creature, and usually on the way you'll end up running into some bullshit, and you have to get the pee of a certain creature. God knows how you're going to do that, and luckily she's already has some. But and then you get to make your tattoo type thing that I was talking about earlier. Previous archaeologists thought that tattooing was applied only to women for fertility or even erotic reasons. The new discovery proves that it involved both sexes, and there may be erotic reasons for it too. Some women might like a man with a tattoo, but a tattoo, see, women, okay, let's just say something kind of in essence, men look at women as far as beauty, and then they want to see their mannerisms, and that makes it more beautiful to them. It becomes attractive. They think certain things, if you will, about the woman, and in a different way than women might approach a man like that. A woman would look at a man like that, and she's looking for a ring. Otherwise, it would just be window shopping. So rather than to go very far in my mind, she's looking for a ring. She's looking at footwear. She's looking at, well, if you have tattoos, what you stand for or what you mean, everything, your mannerisms, how you stand and everything. And it goes the same way, but it's a masculine versus feminine versus masculine thing that goes on. I don't need to explain the birds and the bees to people and the way attraction works, but it could also work in that way too, and involved in both sexes, but not necessarily. Men would put it on as a bravado symbol, but that would actually be an erotic reason for women to see, so it would work both ways. The mummies, known officially as Gebelien Man A and Gebelien Woman, named after the town in the south part of Upper Egypt near Luxor, where they were first discovered, have been part of the British Museum collection for years. And I think it was Wallace E. Budge that found it way back in the day. And so that's kind of a great verifier too, but they've had this thing for hundreds of years. The weird thing is that, when you're looking at the mummy on the ground, and they're fixing to show the pictures of him here, it does not look like good flesh, and what's odd is you can't even see it. And when you take an infrared good picture like this, you see textures of the skin, which is from it pressing into little rocks and everything that have been in the ground forever. So that's not necessarily indicative, but you can see also that there's a striping right here, right? And so there used to be a mat or a fabric that was there that long since rotted away, that was wrapping this person, and it wraps all the way around, and I wonder if you could find traces of it and what it would be and everything, but you could see all kinds of things in more detail. But better than that, all of a sudden out of nowhere shows up, and could have to do with snake worship, and there are women that are doing the same thing that looks like ballerinas, but instead of being the master of beasts, they're holding snakes in their hands. And what does that have to do with anything? Well, snakes were thought of as being a fertility creature, because snakes, whenever they get to looking old and gray-eyed, they shed and get a brand new skin, and then they're just a hair bigger and brand new again. And that means a lot. So that is almost a symbolic rebirth. That's seen in the ancient tale of Gilgamesh, where it eats the special plant that he's got that's supposed to give off life, and he realizes as it slithers away, it sheds its new skin. And the story is supposed to be that's how man lost his immortality, as he gave it away to this wicked snake. And this gets woven into a weird tale into the Bible idea too, and aspects of everything. And I don't need to go into that in this, but the Gebelien man has been on display since his discovery 100 years ago, and is one of the museum's more popular attractions. A post-mortem carried out in 2012 indicates that he was aged between 18 and 21 when he died, and had suffered a stab wound in the back. Tufts of ginger-color hair can still be seen on his scalp, and I'd say it's now more of a golden blonde, and I bet it was a little lighter in his youth, and then it's turning grassy and brown, and a lot like mine did, would kind of, depending on how much time he spent in the sun, would keep highlights or not highlights. And boy, I noticed if I went swimming in a swimming pool, it would pull highlights, but a lot of people would say that's probably over-chlorinated water helping that out somewhat too, of course. But you get your hair wet, and the lensing effect, and it drying out in the sun and everything, and that lightens your hair too. However, the dark smudges on his arms have been overlooked until Antoine, in charge of all human remains, started conservation work on the mummies and decided to examine their skin with infrared imaging. New technology and advanced research. Antoine hopes the results inspire other museums to start new research in their existing collections. It's an opportunity for me to demonstrate that even though some of the collection we have in the museum has been here for a long time, as the science and technology evolves, there's always new opportunities to find out more, or something brand new that you never knew you never do. Just like Otsi, and that time span seems to go, and they're going to talk about it. The oldest example of tattoos are on the Alpine mummy known as Otsi, the Iceman, thought to have lived between 3370 and 3100 BC. So that puts him right in that threshold of time with this same looking guy, with the same kind of tattoos, with the same method going on. Now, are we saying that they were one of the first people that got tattoos, and over in Egypt it just simultaneously happened? No, it comes from a time from before. They were doing this from a lot before. We're lucky we find anything with any desiccated or frozen remains that in any way something like this happens. But there could be people more and more in that permafrost as it's being thawed out, and we probably ought to look into that more as we check that out. But also in the desert, just under that dune right there, are some ruins nobody ever knew. They never knew. And though it looks kind of chintzy, it's from the people from just 1,000 years before that were in this area that nobody ever knew. Proto-Barbarian people. And it can go back further and further and further, but nobody's really digging up under a crap load of sand right now. And it's kind of frowned upon, and it seems like you can only scratch at it in certain places, and places they've pretty much already checked out, right? Very few things are like, well, let's see what's up under here anymore. A lot of times people are allowed to go back to a place now, and go back to a place that they've already semi-excavated, see if they can find anything more, and quite often they find a whole lot more. Like when they excavated it, they only excavated about a third and kind of did the other part but didn't excavate it, and they, okay, not much here, and left it. Well, you excavate the other part and there's this whole little tomb thing built in it you never knew. So Iceman's tattoos consist of geometric patterns rather than figurative images, though. And figurative images are found in the Scythians and stuff, though, too. But there's also geometric patterns, if you'd say the S's and stuff, or whatever. The locations of Otsi's tomb on acupuncture or healing points suggest that they were used as a pain relief treatment, whereas the tattoos on Egyptian mummies were on highly visible areas designed to be shown off. No, what this shows is that they understood the kinetic thing of acupuncture at the time too, and that he may have had more to do with a shamanistic thing that was going on, and a healing thing that had it really as a map on his body. Not only could he point to the spot, it's tattooed on his body. I've got the spots tattooed on my body. I need to do another video about it, but that showed something incredible. And what's the only culture that we know of that pulled off something like this? And is there a connection in ancient times between the Chinese? Well, you look at Tarim Basin mummies, and they've got this going on. But those Tarim Basin mummies they found, they've never take the clothes off of them and see if they've got tattoos around on their body and their acupuncture points. They just show their arms and their other places, but they're pretty much as they're found. And if you check them out, they get up to 6'6" and 6 foot males, females. Males average between that, and there's one reported at almost 7 foot tall. Goliath of the Bible was 6'9". He was 4 cubits in the span. So, at least that's what it says in the earliest of Septuagints. We'll go on. Healing point tattoos. Atuan says that it makes the find so special. It suggests that tattoos were an art form. People are mirroring on their bodies what they are also displaying elsewhere, he sees. And people that have connections are starting to do the same type of things, I say. So that's pretty neat. Man, if I could go back to Tahiti, it was so cool. So like, share, and subscribe, guys, and enjoy. Let's go up here real quick again. Take a look at this picture of this pre-dynastic, first dynastic Egyptian, right in the edge mummy, known as Ginger. I'm okay. Like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy, guys. Let's do one on Otsi coming up. I'm going to have to write that in the schedule here. It probably won't be till like July or something, but we'll get to it. We've got to get these others out of the way. By the way, I've got 40 hours built up already that I could release, but most of it I'm not going to, because half of it at least I feel like I'll be flagged on now. I had a couple of them flagged while they were just sitting there waiting to be released, by the way. Yeah, isn't that strange? Usually it's musical copyrights, though, so that's not strange. They just graph over it like that. Another one is this little part of a news deal that, oh man, it's about 22 seconds. I don't know a way around that unless filming it slow, so all of a sudden the lady's going, and now in the news. But I don't want to have to go through things like that. Surely you shouldn't have to. I see all these people have it and stuff, and I wonder why I can't seem to pull off 4 seconds of video from the 1993 or something documentary that everybody's familiar with. Oh, and it's not even the BBC or anything that's doing it. It's this Grogenberg Associates and Corp and Goldenstein Limited. Peace.